Have you ever noticed that no matter how much you try to solve your life through thinking, the thinking itself becomes the problem? You sit down, perhaps in a quiet moment, perhaps late at night when the world has finally gone still, and you expect some peace, but instead the mind accelerates. It replays a conversation from 3 days ago. It rehearses an argument that hasn't happened yet. It calculates, it worries, it judges, it compares, and somewhere underneath all of that noise there's a part of you that is exhausted. Not physically exhausted, though that too, but exhausted in a deeper way, exhausted from being dragged through time over and over again by something you cannot seem to stop. That exhaustion, that quiet desperation beneath the surface of your daily life is not a personal failure. It is not a sign that something is fundamentally wrong with you.
It is, in fact, the most common human experience on this planet.
And it points directly to something that very few people ever stop to examine, something so close to you, so intimate, that you have never once questioned it. You have believed, without ever consciously deciding to believe it, that you are your thoughts. That the voice in your head, the one narrating your life, judging your choices, worrying about tomorrow, regretting yesterday, that voice is you, that its opinions are your opinions, that its fears are your fears, that when it says you are not enough, or that life is unfair, or that things will never change, it is telling you the truth about reality. But what if it isn't? What if that voice is not you at all? What if you are something far more vast, far more still, far more alive than any thought could ever capture? This is not a comforting idea I am offering you. It is not a positive affirmation. It is not a technique for feeling better. It is an invitation to look at something real, something that is happening right now in this very moment as you listen. Because the moment you truly see what the mind is doing and you see it clearly, without judgment, without resistance, something shifts. Something that has been clenched for years begins very gently to release. Let us begin there. Let us begin with the suffering itself, because that is where most people are, and there is no point pretending otherwise. You know what it feels like to lie awake at 3 in the morning with a mind that will not stop. You know what it feels like to be in the middle of a beautiful day, surrounded by people you love, and yet feel strangely absent, as though you're watching your own life through glass. You know what it feels like to finish one problem, one worry, one crisis, only to find that the mind immediately produces another, as though it cannot tolerate silence, as though peace itself were somehow dangerous. And the cruel irony is this: the more you try to think your way out of this suffering, the deeper into it you go. You analyze why you're anxious, you make plans to feel better, you set goals, you make lists, you tell yourself that once this situation resolves, once this relationship improves, once this career takes off, then you will finally relax, then you will finally be at peace. But it never quite arrives, does it? There's always another condition, always another obstacle between you and that imagined future moment when everything will finally be okay. This is the central illusion of the human mind, and it is so pervasive, so deeply embedded in the way we think that most people never question it for a single moment in their entire lives. They simply live inside it, like a fish that has never questioned the water. The illusion is this, that life is something that happens somewhere other than here and at some time other than now. Think about how you relate to your own life, how much of your mental energy, if you were to measure it honestly, how much of it is spent in the present moment. Actually here, actually sensing what is around you, actually inhabiting this breath, this body, this room, and how much of it is spent somewhere else in the past or the future, in a story about yourself, in a worry, in a regret, in a fantasy. For most people, the honest answer is startling. The present moment receives very little attention. It is treated as a mere transition point, a waiting room between the past they carry and the future they are hoping for. And yet, And this is something worth sitting with very quietly. The present moment is the only place where life actually exists. The past is a memory. It is a collection of thoughts arising now. It is not happening. It is over. And yet the mind treats it as though it were a living wound, returning to it again and again, replaying it, regretting it, defending against it, as though by thinking about it enough, something could be changed. The future is a projection. It is a collection of thoughts arising now. It has not happened. It may never happen in the way the mind imagines, and yet the mind treats it as the location of salvation or the location of catastrophe. Either it will save you or it will destroy you. Either way, the mind is convinced that the future is where the real action is. And so the present moment, this moment, the only moment in which you are actually alive, gets bypassed almost entirely. There's a metaphor that captures this very precisely. Imagine a person so focused on reading the map that they never look up to see the landscape. They know the map intimately. They have studied every road, every contour, every possible route, but they have never actually experienced the journey. They have mistaken the representation of the territory for the territory itself. The mind is the map, and for most people, the map has become more real than the landscape. Now I want to say something carefully here because it is easily misunderstood. The mind is not the enemy. Thinking is not a problem to be eliminated. The mind is a superb instrument when it is used in service of life, when you need to solve a practical problem, to plan, to create, to communicate. The mind is extraordinarily useful. The difficulty arises when the mind takes over completely, when it is no longer a tool you use, but a compulsion you cannot stop, when it runs continuously, even when there is nothing useful to think about. When it generates suffering, not as a side effect, but as its primary activity, that is the mind used wrongly, and for most of humanity that is the default condition. So how did we get here? How did the mind come to dominate so completely? To understand this, we need to look at something that spiritual traditions have pointed to for thousands of years, though they have used many different names for it. In modern psychological language, it is sometimes called the ego, but the word ego carries a lot of baggage, so let us be very precise about what we mean. The ego is not your personality, it is not your individuality, it is not the healthy sense of self that allows you to function in the world. The ego, as we are using the word here, is a mental structure, a construction of thought. It is the sense of self that is created and maintained entirely through thinking. It is the story of you, the narrative, the continuous inner monologue that says, this is who I am, this is what happened to me, this is what I believe, this is what I want, this is what I fear. The ego lives in time. It is made of time. It requires the past to give it identity, and it requires the future to give it purpose. Without the past to define it and the future to project itself into, the ego does not exist. And this is why the ego is so deeply uncomfortable with the present moment, because in the pure present moment, in the simple awareness of what is right now, the ego has no ground to stand on. This is why silence feels uncomfortable to so many people. This is why being alone with yourself, without any distraction, without a phone, without music, without something to do, feels almost unbearable. Because in that silence, the ego begins to dissolve, and the ego interprets its own dissolution as a kind of death. But here's the paradox. What the ego fears as death is actually the doorway to your true love. Let us go deeper into this. Let us look at how the ego uses the past specifically to maintain its existence. You have a story about yourself. Everyone does. A story that began in childhood and has been added to ever since. A story about what kind of person you are, what you deserve, what is possible for you, how people treat you, what your wounds are. This story is not entirely false. Things did happen to you, experiences did shape you, but the story is not who you are. The story is something the mind constructed from those experiences. And the mind clings to this story with remarkable tenacity, even when the story causes pain. Why would anyone cling to a painful story? This is one of the most important questions we can ask. The answer is that the ego would rather be in pain than be nothing. A painful identity is still an identity. A suffering self is still a self. And from the ego's perspective, the self must be preserved at all costs. So the mind returns to old wounds not because it wants to heal them, but because it wants to use them. The wound becomes part of the story becomes part of the identity. And the identity, however painful, feels safer than the unknown openness of simply being present without a story. This is what has been called the pain body. It is not a metaphor for ordinary sadness or temporary grief. It is something more specific. It is an accumulated field of old emotional pain that has not been processed, not been felt fully, not been released. It lives in the body as a kind of energetic residue. And it feeds on more pain. It is attracted to situations that will trigger it. It is drawn to thoughts that will reactivate it. It actually seeks out suffering, not consciously, but compulsively, because suffering is its food. You may have noticed this in yourself. There are days when you wake up and everything seems fine, and yet within an hour, the mind has found something to be upset about. A small irritation has been magnified into a major injustice. A passing worry has become a catastrophic scenario. You find yourself in a state of emotional disturbance that seems completely disproportionate to the actual circumstances of your life. That is the pain body activating. It has found a hook, a thought, a situation, a word someone said, and it has used it as an entry point to flood your system with old accumulated emotional pain. And here is the crucial thing. While the pain body is active, it thinks through you. Its thoughts feel like your thoughts. Its perspective feels like reality. When you are identified with the pain body, you cannot see it. You are it. You believe every catastrophic thought it produces. You feel justified in every grievance it holds. The world genuinely looks dark and threatening, because you are seeing it through the lens of accumulated pain. This is not a character flaw, this is a mechanism, and like all mechanisms, once you understand it, you can begin to relate to it differently. But before we get to that, I want to say something about the future, because the ego uses the future just as cunningly as it uses the past. If the past is used to maintain identity, the future is used to maintain hope. And I want to be very careful here, because I'm not saying hope is bad. I'm saying there is a particular kind of hope that is actually a form of suffering in disguise. It is the hope that says, I cannot be at peace now, but I will be at peace when I find the right relationship, when I get the promotion, when I lose the weight, when the children grow up, when I move to a different city, when I have more money, when my health improves, when things settle down. This kind of hope is the mind's way of postponing life. It creates a permanent psychological state of not yet, of always arriving but never being here. And the tragedy is that even when the conditions are met, when the relationship arrives, when the money comes, when the situation improves, the mind simply moves the goalpost. It finds a new condition, a new reason why peace must be deferred just a little longer, because the mind is not actually interested in peace. Peace is the absence of the mind's activity, and the mind, the ego, is interested in its own continuation. It needs problems to solve, futures to plan, pasts to process. Without all of that, it has nothing to do. And a mind with nothing to do is, from the ego's perspective, a catastrophe. So the mind keeps you in a perpetual state of psychological time, always somewhere other than here, always relating to the present moment as a means to an end, rather than as the end itself. And the cost of this is enormous. The cost is your life. Not your life in some abstract future sense. Your life right this moment, this breath, this extraordinary fact of being conscious, of being alive, of being here, all of it goes unnoticed, unlived, because the mind is somewhere else entirely. Now I want to introduce something that changes everything once you truly grasp it, not as an intellectual concept, but as a living reality. There is something in you that is aware of your thoughts. Read that again, or rather hear it again. There is something in you that is aware of your thoughts. Right now, as you listen to these words, there are thoughts arising, perhaps agreement, perhaps skepticism, perhaps the mind is already formulating an objection, perhaps it is drifting towards something else entirely. All of that is happening, and you are aware that it is happening. That awareness, that simple quiet, effortless knowing that thoughts are occurring, that is not a thought. It cannot be a thought, because it is what is watching the thoughts, it is prior to the thoughts. It is the space in which the thoughts appear. This is what has been called the witness, the observer, the watcher, consciousness itself. And it has been the central discovery of every genuine spiritual tradition in human history, expressed in different languages, different frameworks, different cultural forms, but always pointing to the same essential: recognition. You are not the content of your mind. You are the awareness in which the content of your mind appears. This is not philosophy, this is not a belief system, this is something you can verify directly right now in this very moment. Close your eyes for a moment, if that is comfortable, or simply soften your gaze and ask yourself this question, not as a mental exercise, but as a genuine inquiry. What is here right now before any thought about what is here? There is sensation, there is sound, there is the feeling of breath moving through the body. There is a quality of aliveness, a simple presence, and there is something that knows all of this, something that is not thinking about it, but simply knowing it, directly, immediately, without the mediation of language or concept. That is you, that is what you actually are. Not the story, not the voice, not the worries, not the plans, not the identity the mind has constructed over a lifetime. You are the awareness itself. You are the space in which all of that arises and passes away. And this awareness, this is the important part. This awareness is already at peace. It does not need anything to be different. It does not need the past to have been otherwise. It does not need the future to deliver something. It is simply here, open, clear, undisturbed. The storms of thought and emotion pass through it like weather passes through the sky. The sky is not affected by the storm. It does not resist the storm. It simply remains as it is, vast and open, while the weather does what weather does. You are the sky. You have been mistaking yourself for the weather. Now, when people first encounter this idea, there's often a very specific reaction. The mind says, yes, but my problems are real. Yes, but my situation is genuinely difficult. Yes, but this is all very abstract, and my pain is very concrete. And I want to address this directly, because it is important. Nothing I'm saying denies the reality of your circumstances. Nothing here suggests that pain is not real, that difficulty is an illusion, that you should pretend everything is fine. There would be a kind of spiritual bypassing, a way of using spiritual ideas to avoid actually feeling what is present. That is not what we are pointing to. What we are pointing to is something much more subtle and much more radical. It is the difference between the pain itself, which is real, and the story the mind builds around the pain, which is suffering. Pain is a signal. It is part of being a human being in a body, in a world. Suffering is what happens when the mind resists the pain, when it argues with reality, when it insists that things should be other than they are. The Buddha pointed to this distinction thousands of years ago. There's pain. And then there is the second arrow. The first arrow is the original wound. The second arrow is everything the mind does with the wound. The judgment, the resistance, the story, the projection into the future, the comparison with how things should have been. The first arrow hurts. The second arrow which we throw at ourselves is what creates chronic suffering, and here's what is remarkable. When you stop throwing the second arrow, When you allow the present moment to be exactly as it is, including the pain, including the difficulty, including the uncertainty, something unexpected happens. The pain does not necessarily disappear, but it becomes workable. It becomes something you can be with rather than something you are endlessly fighting against. There is an enormous amount of energy currently being used to resist reality, to argue with what is, to wish that this moment were different from what it is. And when that energy is released, when resistance dissolves, even partially what you find underneath it is a quality of spaciousness, a quietness, a sense of being held by something larger than your personal story. That is not a concept. That is what is available to you right now in this very moment. So how do we actually do this? How do we move from understanding this intellectually to actually living it? Because I want to be honest with you, understanding is not enough. The mind can understand everything I'm saying and use that understanding to construct a new, more sophisticated story about itself. A story in which it is now spiritually awakened or working toward awakening or more evolved than other people who haven't heard this yet. The ego is extraordinarily creative. It can colonize even the most liberating ideas and turn them into new material for its own continuation. So the shift we are talking about is not an intellectual one. It is a perceptual one. It is not about acquiring new beliefs. It is about seeing through the mechanism that generates beliefs in the first place. And it begins with something very simple, almost embarrassingly simple. It begins with noticing, not changing, not fixing, not improving, just noticing. The next time you find yourself caught in a stream of anxious thinking, instead of trying to stop the thoughts, instead of arguing with them or distracting yourself from them, simply notice that you're thinking. Step back even slightly and observe the thought as a thought, not as reality, not as truth. Just as a mental event occurring in the space of your awareness. You might say to yourself very quietly, there's a thought arising that says, I'm not safe. Or there's a thought arising that says, this situation will never improve. You are not affirming the thought, you are not denying it, you are simply recognizing it. As a thought, you are introducing a tiny gap, a sliver of space, between the thought and your identification with it. That gap is the beginning of freedom. It may be very small at first. The thought will likely pull you back in almost immediately. That is fine. That is normal. The mind has been running on automatic for a very long time. You are not going to dissolve decades of conditioned thinking in a single moment of awareness, but each time you notice, each time you step back even slightly, you are strengthening something. You are strengthening the capacity to be present. You are exercising the muscle of awareness. And over time, something begins to shift. The thoughts do not necessarily become less frequent, but your relationship to them changes. They begin to lose their absolute authority. They begin to be seen as what they actually are. Movements in consciousness, weather patterns in the sky of awareness, rather than fundamental truths about reality. There is a beautiful and very practical exercise that points directly to this. At any moment during your day, you can ask yourself, am I present right now, not as a judgment, not as a demand, just as a genuine question? Am I here? And in the very moment you ask it, you are, because the question itself brings attention back to the present moment. You cannot ask, am I present, with presence itself. The question and the answer arise simultaneously. Another way to access presence is through the body. The body always exists in the present moment. It cannot be in the past or the future. It is always here, always breathing, always sensing, always alive in the now. So when the mind is racing, when you feel pulled into the vortex of anxious thinking, you can use the body as an anchor. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel the weight of your body in the chair. Feel the breath moving in and out. Feel the aliveness in your hands, in your chest, in your face. Not as a technique to make the thoughts go away, but as a way of coming home to the dimension of reality that is always available, always present, always here. This is not escapism. This is not avoidance. This is in fact the most direct engagement with reality that is possible, because the present moment, the felt sense of being alive right now, is the only actual contact you ever have with existence. Everything else is a representation. The body, the breath, the simple sensation of being here, that is the real thing. And as you spend more time in that simple, direct contact with the present moment, something very interesting happens to the pain body, because the pain body thrives in unconsciousness, it thrives in identification. It needs you to believe its stories, to be swept away by its emotional weather, to be so caught up in thinking that you never simply feel what is actually present. But when you bring awareness to the pain body, when you feel the emotional energy in your body without telling a story about it, without adding the second arrow, something remarkable occurs. The energy begins to move. It begins to process the pain body, which seemed so solid, so permanent, so definitively who you are, begins to dissolve in the light of conscious attention. This is not always comfortable. Sometimes as you begin to be more present, old feelings arise, old grief, old anger, old fear. Things that have been suppressed and stored in the body for years begin to surface. And the temptation, the very strong temptation, is to push them back down, to distract yourself, to think your way out of the feeling. But if you can stay with it, if you can be the awareness that holds the feeling without being consumed by it, without identifying with it, without adding a story to it, but simply feeling it, breathing into it, allow it to be exactly as it is, then it moves through. It completes itself, because all emotional energy wants to move. It gets stuck only when we resist it. The resistance is the problem, not the pain, the resistance to the pain. And this brings us to one of the most counterintuitive and most liberating teachings that exists, the teaching of acceptance, or as it is sometimes called, surrender. Now I want to be very precise about what surrender means here, because it is almost universally misunderstood. Surrender does not mean giving up. It does not mean becoming passive or allowing yourself to be mistreated or not taking action when action is needed. It does not mean pretending that difficult things are not difficult. Surrender means this: it means accepting the present moment as it is, fully, without inner resistance. It means dropping the argument with reality. It means acknowledging this is what is happening right now. Not what should be happening, not what I wish were happening, not what would be happening if the past had been different. This right now, this is what is. And from that place of acceptance, from that place of non-resistance, action becomes possible, real action, clear action. Action that arises not from anxiety or compulsion or the ego's need to fix and control, but from a deeper intelligence, an intelligence that is connected to the wholeness of the situation rather than trapped in the mind's narrow, fearful interpretation of it. There's a quality of intelligence that operates through presence that the thinking mind simply cannot access. The thinking mind is always working with old information. It is always pattern matching to the past. It is always trying to fit the new into the familiar, but presence, a state of open, alert awareness, can respond to what is actually here, now, freshly, without the filter of accumulated conditioning. This is why the most creative, the most inspired, the most genuinely wise moments of human life tend to arise not when we are thinking hardest, but when the mind has become quiet. In meditation, in nature, in those liminal moments just before sleep or just after waking, in deep conversation, in music, in art, in all of those moments, the thinking mind steps back and something else comes forward, something that knows, something that sees clearly, something that is not afraid that something is what you are beneath the noise. And I want to say something now about the nature of time, because we have been circling around it, and I think it deserves to be addressed directly. The past and the future are real in one sense. They are real as mental content, as thoughts arising now, but they are not real as locations you can actually inhabit. You cannot go to the past, you cannot go to the future. There is only ever this moment. And within this moment, there can be memories of the past and anticipations of the future, but those are present moment experiences. They are happening now. The mind creates what might be called psychological time, a sense of a continuous self moving through time, accumulating a history, heading toward a destination, and this sense of psychological time is the ego's home. It is where the ego lives. In the story of the past and the projection of the future, clock time is real and useful. You need to know what time your appointment is. You need to plan for tomorrow. You need to learn from the past. None of that is being questioned here. The problem is not clock time. The problem is when psychological time takes over. When the mind is so absorbed in its narrative of past and future that the present moment disappears entirely. And the present moment, remember, is not just another moment in the sequence of time. It is the dimension of timelessness itself. It is the only point at which eternity touches time. It is the only place where you can actually be alive. The mystics of every tradition have pointed to this, not as a poetic metaphor, but as a direct description of reality. When they speak of eternity, they do not mean a very long time. They mean the absence of time, the eternal now. The present moment that has always been and will always be, because it is the only thing that is actually real. And you have touched this, you have been here in moments of great beauty when you were so absorbed in a sunset or a piece of music or the face of someone you love that the self temporarily fell away. In moments of deep play, when you were so present in what you were doing that there was no sense of a separate you doing it. In moments of crisis, paradoxically, when the shock of the situation was so immediate that the mind's chatter fell silent and you simply acted clearly and directly from a place beyond thought. Those moments were not accidents. They were not gifts from outside. They were glimpses of what is always available. They were the natural state of consciousness when the ego's grip loosens for a moment. The spiritual path, if we can call it that, is simply the deepening of those glimpses. The gradual recognition that the peace, the clarity, the aliveness you felt in those moments is not dependent on special circumstances. It is not dependent on everything going well. It is not dependent on the mind being quiet. It is the ground of your being itself. It is what you are always underneath the noise. And this recognition, when it deepens, changes everything. Not by changing the circumstances of your life necessarily, but by changing your relationship to whatever circumstances arise. By making you unshakable, not because nothing affects you, but because you are no longer exclusively identified with the part of you that can be shaken. There's a quality of presence that can hold difficulty without being destroyed by it, that can feel grief without becoming grief, that can face uncertainty without collapsing into fear. Not because it is suppressing anything, but because it is larger than anything that arises within it. And this is where I want to say something about compassion, about what happens to your relationship with other people when you begin to wake up from the dream of the ego. When you are identified with your ego, every interaction is filtered through the ego's needs, its fears, its desires, its stories. Other people become characters in your narrative. They are either supporting your story or threatening it. They are either confirming your identity or challenging it. And from that place, genuine connection is almost impossible because you are never actually meeting the other person. You are meeting your idea of them. But when you're present, when you have stepped back from the story even slightly, something opens, you begin to see that the other person is also suffering. That their difficult behavior, their anger, their defensiveness, their cruelty even, is also the ego in pain, is also the pain body acting out. is also a human being who has never been shown how to step out of their own mental prison. And from that recognition, something arises that is not sympathy exactly and not pity. It is something deeper. It is a kind of recognition, and knowing that what is looking through your eyes and what is looking through their eyes is at the deepest level the same thing, the same awareness, the same consciousness, playing different roles in the same dream. This is what the great teachers have called love. Not the emotional love that comes and goes, not the love that is conditional on behavior or reciprocity, but the love that is the natural expression of presence, of seeing clearly, of recognizing the shared ground of being that underlies all apparent separation. You cannot manufacture this love through effort, you cannot decide to feel it, but it arises naturally, spontaneously, as a byproduct of presence. As the ego steps back, love steps forward, not as an emotion, but as a quality of attention, as a way of meeting reality without the filter of judgment and self-interest. And this changes everything about how you move through the world, not dramatically necessarily, not with grand gestures or spiritual performances, but quietly, in the way you listen when someone speaks, in the quality of attention you bring to the simplest tasks, in the way you meet difficulty with something other than panic or resistance, in the way you can be with yourself in silence without needing to escape. These are not achievements. They are not things you can force or manufacture. They are what naturally emerges when the compulsive activity of the ego quiets down even slightly. So let me bring all of this together now very gently and invite you into something. You have been listening for some time. And somewhere in the listening, if something has touched you, if something has resonated, it is not because I have given you new information, it is because something in you has recognized what is being pointed to. Something in you already knows this, has always known this. The awareness that is listening right now is the same awareness we have been talking about throughout this entire conversation. It is not somewhere you need to get to. It is not a state you need to achieve. It is not a reward waiting at the end of a long spiritual journey. It is here. It is now. It is what is reading these words. It is the silence between these sentences. It is the knowing that is present even before any thought about what is known. And the invitation, the only real invitation, is this: rest there just for a moment, not forever. Not as a permanent project, just now, right now. Let the mind do what it does. Let thoughts arise and pass. Let sensations be as they are. Let this moment be exactly as it is. And notice underneath all of it, there's a quality of presence that is undisturbed, that is not waiting for anything, that is not afraid of anything, that is simply quietly, profoundly here. That is you. That is what you have always been. Beneath the noise, beneath the story, beneath the accumulated weight of a lifetime of thinking, you do not need to carry all of that into this moment. The past does not need to come with you. The future does not need to be solved right now. The only thing that is real, the only thing that has ever been real is this aliveness, this awareness, this breath, this moment. The mind will protest. It will say, but what about my problems? What about my responsibilities? What about everything I need to figure out? And you can say to the mind very gently, yes, we will attend to all of that in the appropriate moment with the appropriate attention. But right now, just for this breath, there's nothing to solve. There's only this. And in that recognition, however brief, however fragile, however quickly, the mind reasserts itself. In that recognition, something is healed. Something that has been clenched begins to open. Something that has been fighting begins to rest. Not because the circumstances have changed, not because the problems have disappeared, but because you have remembered even for a moment what you actually are. And what you actually are has never been broken, has never been lost, has never needed to be fixed. It has only been overlooked.
Overlooked in the rush of thinking, in the noise of the mind, in the endless drama of the ego's story.
But it is here, it has always been here, waiting not impatiently but with infinite patience because it exists outside of time entirely, waiting for you to come home. And home is not a place, home is not a future moment when everything will finally be okay. Home is this. Home is the simple, direct, unmediated experience of being alive right now in this moment, without the story. Come home, not tomorrow, not when things are better, not when you have figured everything out. Now, just now, this is enough. This moment exactly as it is enough. You, exactly as you are enough. The stillness that you have been searching for in every experience, in every relationship, in every achievement, that stillness is not something you find, it is something you uncover. By setting down very gently the weight of everything you have been carrying, the weight of who you think you are, the weight of what you think you need, the weight of the story, set it down just for now, and notice what remains. What remains is the beginning. What remains is the truth. What remains is you, as you have always been before the first thought, before the first story, before the first fear, vast, still alive, present. And that is enough. That has always been enough.